Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. It's fantasy football draft season. I think it's safe to say that there's no position more important in fantasy football in 2019 than the running back position. So let's count down the top 10 fantasy running backs for 2019 fantasy drafts. And let's be clear about this. Regardless of the format, whether it's PPR, half-point PPR, non-PPR, these top 10 are going to remain the same. So we'll keep it that way straight on through fantasy draft season if no injuries happen. And why we have the top 10, by the way, is my number one thing in drafts this year is I want to get at least one of these guys, and ideally, if I can get two, I'm going to be pretty darn happy on draft day. So let's get into it, the top 10. And of course, at number 10, we have Dalvin Cook. You know, there's a lot of speculation with Dalvin Cook because we really don't have a full track record of him in the NFL, but he's in a great position in this Minnesota offense to produce minimal competition for touches. And we know that there's some high-powered weapons there, so he should be able to capitalize on that offense as a whole and, you know, maybe even clean up a little bit of those goal line opportunities, score a couple extra touchdowns because the team can move the ball. So even though we're speculating on Cook, he's actually poised to break out in a big way this year. Like him as the number 10 running back. At number 9, Todd Gurley. Now, last year at this time, he was the number 1, but of course we know week 16 sits out, CJ Anderson goes nuts, and Todd Gurley owners are left holding the bag in the fantasy championship. And then, of course, he didn't finish particularly well in the NFL playoffs. The injury concerns are there. The team addressed the running back position by, bringing in Darrell Henderson, by re-signing, matching the offer sheet with Malcolm Brown. So the situation is going to be a little bit different. But that being said, maybe their presence will actually help Gurley sustain some fantasy value so he doesn't have to do all of the heavy lifting in the backfield. He's a risky pick, there's no doubt about it, but with that risk could potentially come reward. So I like him at number 9. At number 8, Joe Mixon. Last year we saw increased efficiency after 3.7 yards per carry in his rookie season. He goes up over 5 yards per carry last year. 19.9 touches per game. Only 5 running backs were over 20 touches per game. So Mixon, one of the most heavily used backs in the league. Of course, the wide receiver core with A.J. Green getting banged up and very likely missing at least one game and maybe more in the beginning of the season doesn't help the cause. But there's some exciting potential for Mixon this year in this offense, given Zach Taylor in now at head coach. So it should look pretty different for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I do like Joe Mixon as a top 10 option, have him there at number 8. At number 7, one of last year's biggest surprises, James Conner. I mean, the surprise, of course, that LeVeon Bell sat out the entire season. But Conner capitalized, and you know what? To be fair, Conner did something with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year that Bell never did in his time with the Steelers, and that scored double-digit touchdowns. We talk about these guys up over 20 touches per game. Conner was one of those guys. Now, he did miss time at the end of the season, and the offense is going to be different this year with no Antonio Brown. So obviously a couple moving parts here, but the way the Steelers use their lead back with all the touches that go to that guy, you know, we saw it with Le'Veon Bell, we saw it with D'Angelo Williams, we saw it with Conner last year. Conner's in position to put up some major fantasy points yet again this year. Expect him to very likely go. And by the way, all these guys will be off the board by the middle of the second round. So expect Conner to maybe even go in the back end of the first round of your drafts. Let's get to number 6. We just talked about him. Le'Veon Bell. He apologized to you fantasy players. He's sorry for last year. Well, you better make up for it this year, Le'Veon Bell. You are in a position where you're not in as good of an offense, certainly, as you were in Pittsburgh, but you have very little competition for touches. I think Le'Veon Bell is, clearly the 3-down option in that backfield. He's a guy who could easily go up over 250 carries, who could easily catch 60-plus balls. He could go up over 300 touches if everything shakes out the right way. With that sort of volume with Le'Veon Bell, it's going to be hard for him to not be a top 10 option. So love or hate him, for fantasy purposes, there's very real fantasy value with Le'Veon Bell as a top 10 running back here in 2019. Going to number 5, David Johnson. Last year, one of the biggest fantasy disappointments. Johnson, he was drafted widely as the number 3 running back off the board, maybe even number 2. Finished as the number 9 in PPR last year. He was 11th in points per game. So not as bad as a lot of people made it out to be, but certainly not what you signed up for on draft day. but we know a 3-down back in a potentially very exciting offense with Cliff Kingsbury in there at head coach, with Kyler Murray under center. David Johnson's value is going to rebound this year, like him as the 5th running back off the board. But this year, though, I think there's a clear drop at that spot. The top 4 are off by themselves. You can expect in a lot of your drafts that it goes running back, running back, running back, running back, and it's going to be some combination of these 4 guys in some way, shape, or form. So at number 4 for me, I go with Alvin Kamara, and let's be clear, I couldn't fault you if you had Kamara higher. I have him at 4, but we're really splitting hairs here. The only reason why I have him at the bottom of this list is he's not a true feature back. We saw him split with Mark Ingram in the past. We've seen him carry, the first month of the season last year, he carried a full workload, but the team brought Latavius Murray in for a reason. Latavius Murray's going to have a role in this backfield, so it's not like we would say Alvin Kamara is a favorite to lead the league in touches. That's the one knock on him, but his efficiency on those touches is off the charts. It is not a knock on Kamara whatsoever. He's a phenomenal player, and he's very much in the mix to be the number 1 running back this year, but I have him at 4. At 3, I have Christian McCaffrey, another guy who offers a massive ceiling in terms of receptions, and last year we saw him get up over 200 carries as well, so that's really important. Unlike Kamara, there's almost no competition for touches in that backfield for Christian McCaffrey, so a great situation for him to just continue right where he left off last year. He's in the mix as well. But the top 2 kind of separate themselves from the other 2 in this top 4. At number 2, I actually have Saquon Barkley. I know a lot of people have him at number 1, but here's the deal. Here's why I have him where I do. My concern isn't with touch volume at all. We know he's going to touch the ball a lot. He's also going to face some stacked defenses, stacked boxes. He did that last year too. He's going to kill you, as a receiver if he doesn't kill you as a runner. The problem overall is that the state of the Giants offense, even heading into training camp, didn't look that great. Then you hit training camp, you lose Corey Coleman for the season. You have Sterling Shepard banged up. You have Golden Tate suspended for the first 4 games of the year. It gets worse, right? It gets worse for the Giants. So that's a little bit of a concern. It's not a knock on Saquon because he's phenomenal. But it's the separator. It's what really puts a little bit of distance between him and the number 1 guy for me, although I do think Saquon will go first overall in a lot of drafts. However, if it came to me, I'm going to go with Ezekiel Elliott first overall. I know the situation isn't 100% clear with Ezekiel Elliott. Of course, if we get deeper into August and we don't have any answers to our questions, then we're going to have to reevaluate. But if Elliott is on the Cowboys, he's signed, he's ready to go, he gets his extension and he's ready to roll, then here's the thing with Elliott that I like over Saquon. The surrounding cast is better. It's a more stable situation from an offensive standpoint. You have Amari Cooper come in and really give that passing game a different dimension. Dak Prescott continuing, his 3rd straight year with 20-plus touchdown passes. He has 6 rushing scores, so he gives you a little bit on the ground as well. And then Elliott, 2 out of the last 3 years, he's had over 300 carries. The only other year he didn't do it, of course, was the suspension year. We're trying to forget about that still for fantasy purposes. But the reality is, you say who's the favorite in the league to lead the league in carries? It's Zeke. And touches, it's Zeke. Volume is key in fantasy football. Now, his touchdown production wasn't where it needed to be last year for us for fantasy, but look for some positive regression there this year. With all that volume on the table, I think you go with the sort of highest floor, safest bet. There's no such thing as safe in fantasy football, but safest bet here at 1 overall, and that is Ezekiel Elliott. You want to check out the rest of our running back rankings and the rankings for every other position as well. You can do all that and more at PFF.com.